I was crouched in the shower, wrench in hand, tightening the last stubborn pipe, warm water spraying against my arm when she came crashing through the bathroom door. Her perfume hit me first, sharp, sweet, unmistakable. And then I saw her. Hair tousled, dress clinging, face flushed, breath quick, and for a second I thought she'd run all the way from somewhere else just across the little strip of tile between us. She'd sworn tonight was a no-guys outing, some girl's only thing she claimed she needed. But something about the way she shoved past me was too sharp, too deliberate, like a practiced motion more than a stumble, and in the split second my brain registered that. She stripped off her dress without a word, and that's when I saw them. The bruises, the scratches, the crescent of teeth pressed into her shoulder, marks that weren't mine and that didn't belong to any fight we'd had. For a moment, everything inside me stopped. My jaw locked, chest hollowed, the room felt far too small to hold the sudden weight of all of it. This was the woman I had built my life around. The one whose laugh lit up our dinners, whose hand always found mine mid-conversation, whose voice had steadied me in the worst of nights, the person I trusted with the mundane and the catastrophic, and there on her skin, the proof of her betrayal was written in bruises and in the small, tawny arcs of someone else's cologne caught in her hair. Deep down, I had known for weeks about the late nights she couldn't explain, the dinners where she stared through me, the faint trace of another man's scent at the nape of her neck, but I had convinced myself to let it go, to trust her more than my instincts, because trust had become our religion, our currency, and admitting its failure felt like admitting I'd been bankrupt all along. That night stripped away the final illusion. She noticed me looking, saw my eyes linger on the marks, and panic flashed in her before her expression hardened, daring me to ask. I didn't ask. I nodded once, feigned calm, and left the room. The small nod a dishonest thing, but it let me walk out without collapsing, and she mistook my silence for weakness, for acceptance. She thought she'd won. But revenge isn't a scream, it's a scalpel. It's small, precise, surgical. I started gathering evidence. Quietly, without drama, phone records, bank statements, receipts. A stealth app slipped on her laptop that logged timestamps and browser histories. Screenshots of messages she deleted fast, but not fast enough. Photos of hotel keycards she tossed in the trash the morning after and that I retrieved with a pair of gloves and patient fingers. Every lie she told led me closer to him. A coworker with a polite laugh, a husband, a father whose face smiled familiarly in the photos she'd thought no one would see. I didn't confront her. I documented everything. I took copies of every claim, every plausible deniability, because the best revenge isn't noise. It's proof that leaves no room for the petty excuses love and shame can manufacture. I built my exit plan in the same calm way I replaced the rusted pipes in our house. Methodically, one bolt at a time. I met with a divorce lawyer in secret, someone practical and blunt, who told me about asset protection and timelines and how to untangle joint accounts without scaring the other person into sudden destruction. I opened accounts she didn't know about and pulled my name from liabilities that could have dragged me down. I learned the value of timing. The right papers filed in the right order can turn a shared life into a private victory without a single public scene. 2 months later, I was still living at the same address, still eating at the same table, still passing her in the hallway like a practiced actor in a play about normalcy, but on paper, I was already gone. I had moved my future into a few notarized pages and a bank account she assumed was dormant. She kept the illusion, I kept the consequence. When her birthday came around, she asked for a celebration, wanted friends and wine and the illusion of normality because that's what people do when they're covering up a fracture. They redouble the show, they invite witnesses, they pretend the stage is intact. I gave her exactly that, laughter, music, a toast so perfectly delivered that no one could sense the venom simmering beneath my calm exterior. Every guest was chosen carefully, including him, because revenge, like art, requires an audience, and the right set of eyes makes the truth unbearable. She didn't know I had already tipped off his wife. I had slid a folder across a restaurant table to a woman whose face had been clean in the photos but weary in real life, had told her nothing except the truth, and left the rest to her fury. The plan was simple: let the evidence do the work. On the night of the party, I moved through the living room like a conductor, a glass here, a toast there, a careful compliment at the cake table, while my phone sat in my pocket like a loaded camera. She floated among her friends, laughing too loudly, touching him with a small, greedy familiarity as if no one could see because they couldn't or didn't want to. They thought they were discreet. They weren't. I waited until the cake was sliced, until all eyes were fixed on her, until cameras, phones held high like little altars of the moment, were pointed her way. And then his wife made her move. She stepped into the center of the room, raised the stack of photos I'd given her, and with a flick of her hand scattered them. Hotel rooms, parked cars, nights half documented and half sacrificed to the grainy logic of cell phone flashes spilled across the floor and drifted down like black and white snow. Hotel lobbies with their bad art. Motel carpeting with coffee stains. A hand on an exposed back. A crumpled receipt with a timestamp. A message thread open to the middle of something that needed no context to sting. The room went still. Gasps rippled through the circle of guests like wind over leaves. Voices, whispers at first, swelled into the shape of questions. My wife's smile broke first. It didn't fracture. It dissolved into panic. His face was ash. The color bled out of it like ink in water. People shifted, glancing between her and him, then at me as if wondering who had been the architect of the reveal. She looked at me then, eyes wide, and her voice trembled with a question that was equal parts accusation and prayer. "You planned this?" I said nothing. I didn't have to speak. The room already knew. His wife's voice cut through the silence like a whip. She screamed his name and then a roar that was old and exhausted and hot with betrayal. He tried to speak, stuttered, offered excuses that hung like wet laundry, useless and sad. My wife grabbed my arm, clung, whispered frantic, small pleas that had once been love, or some approximation of it. "Please, please, please don't do this. I can explain." I pulled my arm away, slow, deliberate, final. That small, precise motion conveyed more than any speech could. The end had been chosen. Papers were signed within weeks. Our lawyer handled it with the indifferent efficiency of someone who had seen many such endings. Every asset I had secured stayed with me. On the table where we had postponed conversations about retirement funds and vacation plans, there were new stacks of documents that spelled out the division of money without emotion. She walked away with almost nothing, only what the law and my measured mercy allowed her to take, enough for survival and memory, but not for rebuilding a life on top of someone else's ruin. His wife took everything from him, not out of malice, but because the trust he'd shown her had simply evaporated. The children, if there were children, became collateral in a war neither of us wanted but both of us waged. His career unraveled under the weight of scandal because people are more comfortable judging someone's private collapse than reckoning with their own complacency. In the end, they were left with each other. Two broken creatures clutching at the ruins they had made, poison embracing poison. Friends asked if it hurt, if I regretted the brutality of my actions. Honestly, it hurt at first. There was a hollow ache, like the place in my chest where a tooth is pulled, sharp then dull, because I had loved, because the memory of better things still existed, like light caught in dust. But regret? No. Betrayal doesn't deserve conversation, it deserves consequences. I gave her revenge, precise, merciless, delivered where it would wound most. After it was done, people approached me with cautious, pained curiosity, as if I were both villain and victim in some morality play they'd been handed. Some said I'd gone too far, that public exposure was cruel, that dignity in divorce was better for everyone. Others, quieter, told me they would have done the same, that there's a certain purity in not letting someone get away with destroying what you thought was sacred. I stopped answering those conversations. What I felt now when I passed the mirror was not guilt and not triumph, but a clear, cold certainty, the knowledge that I had acted like a surgeon, excised the tumor, and sealed the wound. Love is delicate, trust is holy, and vengeance, when executed with care, becomes, in its own way, art, and art lasts. Sometimes late, when the house is quiet and the old echoes of laughter have been scrubbed from the rooms like graffiti, I find my hand hovering over my phone, tempted to look at the messages one last time, to taste again the small electric pain of that betrayal. But then I remember the cake strewn with photos, the way his wife's face hardened into something like peace as she walked out with the truth clutched in her hands, and I remember how I felt standing at the window that night after the party, watching taillights fade into a city that would gossip and forget and move on. I felt neither joy nor triumph, nor the thin, toxic satisfaction of vindication. What I felt was a quiet, terrible closure. I had given her back the only thing she had truly lost, the ability to pretend. She had shattered my trust, so I returned the favor by removing the option to pretend it hadn't happened. People say revenge poisons the avenger more than the target. Maybe that's true in some cases, but there's a difference between being poisoned and choosing to inoculate yourself. I inoculated myself. I rewired my life to protect the things I still valued: honesty, my future, the ability to wake up without asking myself which version of my partner I would find that day. Now when I pass a mirror, I see a face that has been tempered, not stainless and blameless, but hard enough to know the difference between mercy and weakness, and clever enough to have chosen the former where it mattered, and the latter where it would have destroyed me. The house stays quiet these days. I keep the lights a bit brighter than before. There are no more late night excuses, no furtive texts, no smell of other perfumes that aren't mine. Sometimes I think of asking her to meet, to talk like grown people about the waste of us, but then I remember the way she looked in the middle of the scattered photos, and I realize that some conversations are only for the record, for the contracts and the lawyers, and some truths are best left to the clean, brutal clarity of evidence. I traded a life of illusions for a life of facts, and in that ledger my balance finally reads even.